Hello. Thank you for joining us today. I am Chris Lee, senior reporter for New York Magazine and its culture website, Vulture. I'm excited to introduce our guests today, all of whom you've just seen in the film. We have Hamid Shams, director of The Way Forward. This is not the first time Hamid has partnered with Colburn. In 2015, working with filmmaker Murray Grigor, Hamid delved into Colburn's Pitagorsky archives and directed a documentary about one of the leading 20th century cellists. Then at the start of the pandemic last year, he and Colburn began to envision a film that reimagines the concert-going experience for the digital age, The Way Forward. We have Eric Whitacre, composer and conductor of the virtual choir, Sing Gently. Grammy Award-winning composer and conductor Eric Whitacre is among today's most popular musicians. His works are programmed worldwide, and his groundbreaking virtual choirs have united singers from more than 145 countries. Olivia Jacobus, dancer and Colburn graduate. Olivia studied in Colburn's Dance Academy for 3 years and is now in the professional division in the Pacific Northwest Ballet School. Not only a gifted dancer, she was the valedictorian at her high school graduation and has an impressive social media following on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, with 85,000 followers on TikTok alone. She is also a brand ambassador for Discount Dance. Kardan, president of Colburn School. Having led the institution since 2009, Sel has overseen the creation of 2 new academies since then, the Music Academy, a program for gifted young pre-college musicians, and the Dance Academy, a training program for exceptional pre-professional ballet dancers. In fact, we saw and heard students and alumni from both academies in the film today. Danielle, Niese, soprano and Colburn alumna. Not many lyric sopranos who have thrilled audiences worldwide, from the Metropolitan Opera to Covent Garden, have also performed on stage with LL Cool J or sung in a Ridley Scott movie, nor have they won an Emmy Award as a TV host at age 16. Danielle Niese, born in Melbourne, Australia, moved to Los Angeles at the age of 10 to continue her classical training at Colburn's Community School of Performing Arts. Danielle will be joining us in a bit, and we're looking forward to hearing from her later in our conversation. Now, I know our audience is waiting to hear all of your perspectives on the film, so let's get started. Hamid, the film does such an elegant job of presenting performances that took place across different time zones and international borders, but I'm sure that must have presented any number of logistical difficulties. In opening, I was hoping you could talk about how you pulled this off. How did you coordinate with the artists without being physically at the same place at the same time? And what level of difficulty did that present among the many things you had to film?
Sure. Just one thing to quickly clarify. The Pitagorsky film cellist, the director was Murray Grigor. I was the cinematographer and editor. Yes, this film was, for me, it was very exciting because it was last year this time that we started the filming. Actually, Eric was the very first person that we interviewed. He happened to be conducting in the Zipper Hall, and we got some shots of him conducting and working with Sam. And then we did the first interview, and we went for 5 weeks straight, almost 4 or 5 days a week filming. The challenge for it at the beginning was, first of all, safety was a big issue, because this was a time that nobody was getting out of their house, and nobody was, streets were empty and animals were walking around the streets. And that's the period. It's much different than now, a year later, that people are more getting out. So the big challenge was, since we couldn't get people to come out to one place or even perform, at the time we were trying to keep them more than 6 feet. We were keeping them 15, 20 feet apart, just because of so many unknown on the issue. And safety was a big concern for Colburn, and they keep emphasizing that on every meeting that we had. We had numerous meetings. And so the idea that we came up with was gathered a whole bunch of iPads, and with Fred and Francesco, who were the audio masters of the piece, they put an audio package together with stereo microphones, and we shipped these out to various people around the world. And in order, I had to first scout the place just to find a location that we could film everyone. And you have to get a perspective of 3D of the place. So someone would go show me, and we would choose finally a corner. And then when they receive the package, we'd send them certain lights and certain audio gear and the iPad, of course. And I would use their iPad or their computer as a way to look into the iPad that we send them, and we put the camera app on it so I could control it manually with the exposure and white balance, etc. And was able to set each shot and be able to look at it and then use the second laptop or iPad as so they could see me, so I could interview them as well. And we would set them up. All the performance happened live while they performed every piece, and they recorded it on that device that we send it to them. And they would ship back their stuff to us. We would get the audio, sync it up. Francesco and Fred would work on the audio and put them together, which was a huge task as well, especially for Mendelssohn, which we had 8 musicians and we had to mix all these pieces. It was very, very challenging job, and they did an outstanding job on that. And so we got to interview each person remotely that way, and equipment would come out, cleaned up, sanitized, and sent to the next person. And so that's how we managed to get all the interviews and all the filming.
I just want to put a finer point on this for 1 second. So when we see Esa-Pekka Salonen standing in front of a distant Baltic lake, and we see the musicians in Zipper Hall, they're performing this piece of music live while you are doing your own conducting as a director from a office in New Jersey.
Correct, to a click track. We filmed, at the time, Esa-Pekka was in by Baltic Sea, so I did the same thing, scout his house, and we were trying a corner of the house, and from the corner of the house through the window, I saw the lake out there. And I said, "Is that the lake out there?" He said, "Yes, it's Baltic Sea." So we went out there and I chose that place. And then we did the same thing. So he basically did it to a click track. And then the same thing, musician played to a click track as well. Musician, we had to do each individual group of 3 or 4. Trumpet, trombone, and and drums, and we had to do each of those separately, and we mixed them all together afterward. With Francesco did the audio mix, which was a tremendous job. Fred and Francesco.
And if just one last technical question, if this was filmed, if you began filming about a year ago, this is really at the height of pandemic.
Correct.
Fears and uncertainty. So, some of the performers are shown wearing masks in between setups, and it sounds like that those safety protocols were an important part of the production.
Those were the performers that came to Zipper Hall. There were few local that we brought them to the school, and so the dancers and the thing that they perform in the school, they came in and with all the protocol of staying far away and all the mask and everything. And then during the performance, everybody was far away from them. As a matter of fact, we would set up the cameras and then everybody would leave the Zipper Hall. So I was the only one that could see what's happening because I had an iPad behind every camera, basically. And so I had like basically 3 computers and 2 iPads and 2 iPhones, and I have like all around me sitting right here. And I was watch everyone's what they do, and I would tell them at 3 or 4 people at the time we film, except the drum section, percussion section, that we did it individually, single person. So they had to wear masks, and during the performance when nobody was in the room, they would remove the mask and they would perform.
That's incredible. I don't think I'll ever look at my own iPad the same way, knowing that you were so crucial to your process here. Sel, I'd like to direct a question your way. There's a moment in the film when Fabio Bedini of the school's piano faculty is discussing the various challenges of continuing to educate students under pandemic circumstances. But he points out that the very things that disrupted and disrupt Colburn's business as usual have also managed to focus the students, increase the level of dedication by the faculty. So, and I want to say hello to Niese. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. Hi everyone. How are you guys? Hey. Danielle.
But anyways, to get back to the question, the very things that disrupted Colburn also managed to focus the students and increase dedication by the faculty. I was hoping you might speak a little bit more on that. How have the disruptions due to coronavirus compelled the Colburn community to sort of double down on what is really important to you all?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'll say that when we were working on this film in March and we were all, or April, May, when we were all pivoting, we did so quickly, only thinking what it would be a 3-month period of time, or maybe till the fall, and here we are, 14 months later. So, Chris, it was extraordinary how quickly our faculty and our staff really pulled together, and particularly on the faculty and student side, adapted to a completely new learning environment. Certainly, everyone had familiarity with the technology, but to actually be teaching online on a regular basis. And I think the first thing that we saw was just an incredible amount of investment on the part of our faculty in trying to get the technology right, trying to ensure that the audio quality was optimal. We had challenges because we had very much in our conservatory international student body and in our music academy as well. So we had students on every conceivable time zone. So faculty teaching late into the night, early in the morning, and we had to juggle our entire academic schedule to accommodate people living around the world. So that was a interesting learning curve for us. But simply, I think the faculty realized that the students needed more time in this environment. So sort of our horn professor, Andrew Bain, who's featured in the film, started doing a daily check-in class with all of his students. So in addition to their private lesson every week, every morning or whatever time of day they'd settle on, all the students would gather and they'd have a half hour together just to see how everybody was doing. I mean, as much for the well-being emotionally for the students as musically. But we saw that across the board with our faculty. So our students and the institution owe our faculty a great debt of gratitude for their investment. And they taught throughout the entire summer. Typically, they'd all be headed off to summer music festivals because all of them are canceled, as we know. So that was a big change for the faculty too. So they went into the fall really without the typical academic summer break, which was a tremendous commitment of their time and a sign of their dedication. But I always say, what if this pandemic had happened 20 years ago? What would have occurred? Simply, there would not have been any ability to have any of this kind of communication. And I think the school had been fortunate that we'd been making investments in our streaming capability, in our robotic cameras in our concert halls. We'd moved on to internet too. So we did have some of the building blocks in place. And then as soon as everything hit, we said, let's make even more of investment. And I know you'll talk to Eric in a minute, but in a way it was Eric's inspiration. Eric, maybe you'll tell the story about how you were flying on a plane back from New York, one of the last flights, back the West Coast, and the chairman of our board, Andrew Milstein, was on that flight as well. And the two were talking about, what the world needed at that moment. And that's really what sort of kind of inspired you to bring back your virtual choir.
Eric, I do have a bunch of questions, but I just wanted to follow up with one more thing, so before I leave this strain of thought. The film comes out at this moment, and I find it to be a very hopeful piece. It talks about the importance of interconnectivity in the way that music and performance and dance are able to provide that sort of connective tissue at a time when people are feeling increasingly separate. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit as well about why this was the right time for Colburn to commission a film like The Way Forward and what it intends to speak to.
Sure. Typically at that time of year in the spring, in fact, right about now, we would have the school's annual gala, which is a very important benefit for the institution. It supports scholarships at the school, but it's also a moment to sort of take stock of all the wonderful things that happen at the school during the year and bring our Colburn community together, our students, our faculty, our supporters, our board. And of course, we had a date for the gala in April last year, and it was immediately canceled. We knew it couldn't happen. And so I think this became a project to really bring the community to say, yes, we're all separated, but we're still a community of artists. And by making this film, we can connect with each other. In fact, we had an opportunity to connect with some of our incredible alums like Danny here or Chris Bowers too through this project. So it really even became a larger enterprise than probably our typical gala event would be. So that was the catalyst. We knew we couldn't do a gala. We wanted to do something. We'd worked with Hamid before. We wanted to do something that wasn't simply a live Zoom event. We wanted something that had lasting value. Now, who would have known? We had concern. I remember we were rushing to finish the film because we thought, well, what if the pandemic ends by July? Then the film will have less relevance. Well, here we still are. I think the relevance remains. So.
For sure, for sure. Okay, well, Danielle, thank you for joining us. It's very
Hey, yes, pleasure to be here.
Meet you via Zoom like this. I felt your performance of the Handel piece creates such an interesting juxtaposition in the film. There you are in what appears to be a stately home in Glyndebourne, England, and there's your accompanist, Min-Hai Choi, amid the angular modern architecture of the school's courtyard in Los Angeles. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about what it was like to perform this piece of music under such unusual circumstances. What was that like for you?
Oh my goodness. It was definitely one of the most unusual experiences of my life. Hamid will be able to tell you as well. I have filmed a lot of things in very interesting circumstances, and I've done lots of TV where you've had to sort of, jump out of a truck and film something quickly and move on. And this was a totally other level of filming. I mean, when you would perform for something like this, you would be mailed lots of kit. So that was the first step, was opening up these boxes and looking at all of this incredibly professional kit that Hamid had put together for us. And then the really interesting bits came with sort of having multiple phones on FaceTimes where, to be directed from New York with a sound engineer in Los Angeles was really surreal. It was kind of amazing that it worked. And I mean, it really tells you so much about how needs must, we are so driven in the arts. When we need to connect with people, when we need to communicate, we make it possible. And of course, we're just so lucky that we live in this digital age where you can get a box of kit and through the Wi-Fi, fingers crossed, you can communicate with someone. So we would set up these phones behind the viewfinders. So, what I found truly astounding, and it really is a testament to Hamid's commitment to make an intensively high quality piece and not compromise anything in terms of his artistic standards, just because we were in the pandemic and we had restrictions and constrictions and time differences. We got Hamid to be able to see every viewfinder from every angle, and Hamid was right there, directing the lighting, directing the props, directing what was in the background, and really, being quite a perfectionist about what he wanted to achieve, because he could see the final vision of what he wanted to execute. And of course, none of us could really see that. We operated as an artist. You put faith in the people you work with. So it was incredible to watch him with such patience as well, setting up everything slowly. My husband, Gus Christie, who is the chairman of Glyndebourne, he used to be a cameraman and for wildlife films. And so Gus and I were there for about 6 hours on the first day, being Hamid's, setup crew basically. And we were setting everything up, and we were listening on the Wi-Fi and, getting it just so. And I think you can see that in the result. I mean, the capture of what happened was after many, many hours of setup. And then we just went, okay, now let's get down to the essence of the piece and what is the music about. And it's about pain, and it's about not being able to feel a way through pain, but understanding it and not reveling in it, but embracing that pain. And I could feel that when I was singing it, that I felt very seen by the cameras, even though I was working with the director who was so far away. And when I saw it back, I just felt the whole way in which it worked was very magical, and it didn't feel apart. Actually, it felt very synchronized and very together, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, I mean, speaking as an audience member, I don't think it felt compartmentalized either. But to hear you tell it, that maybe Colburn's going to have to start offering a course about how to become your own cinematographer in the event of a pandemic. But Danielle, just to keep following through, in the film, you speak of classical music having withstood the test of time, and I thought that that was an important message, that this
Absolutely.
stuff is eternal. And if I'm hearing you correctly, you feel it is going to take more than a pandemic to diminish this music's importance in people's lives. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that it's mostly in times of crisis and world events and catastrophes. The first thing that people do when they do come together is they sing. Music is an incredibly transformative part of the human condition, the human spirit. We need sound, and if be it chant or rhythm or choral pieces, but togetherness and making music, making harmony, making sort of cohesive sound, even in the most basic level, is part of what I think humans need in order to feel community. And it can be through a spoken word, but a spoken word is the only difference between, in my view, the only difference between spoken word and song is just the bed of sound on which the word is communicated. For me, music is not about vanity. So it's not about listen to my beautiful voice, but more listen to what is coming out. And my voice is the tool that brings it out. So I think that absolutely, classical music has withstood the test of time, and it will be around long after we are all gone. All of the great composers and the great pieces and the great performances will be remembered. And now we have a way to archive this century and the previous century's performances in a way that the origins of classical music didn't necessarily have. So if you go back 400 years, we had to do a lot of sleuthing and a lot of sort of detective work to try to figure out what there was. So it was like being archaeologists of music. Although from the last century onto this century and onwards, everything will be so pristinely preserved, so it will be like finding sort of gems in the stones that are perfectly formed, and we'll be able to study them and understand them, and it will move music forward. I think always perpetually moving forward.
That's a lovely way to put it.
It's one thing I must jump in here, say one of the best part of the experience was the commitment and the willingness of every artist in this film to the project. They really, like, even Danny was, I spent a couple of days looking. First we scouted the place, decided where we're gonna shoot it, we decided on the wardrobe, we decided on everything. And the time that they each put into the project was so rewarding, and that was the best part of the experience for me. It gave me so much energy. The list goes on, and the family members who helped. The Gus was helping, they went through. It takes a long time to set up the cameras and the lights, and especially trying to show them, the distance. You cannot see it really on a 2D, the distance, like to move it up and down. So you have to keep trying, and it took a long time for each setup and each shoot. And the family members were so wonderful too. They all pitched in, and they all worked long hours to do this. So that was really the amazing part, was their willingness gave me so much energy actually to accomplish more than I could have at the time.
Well, you have energy from the community, and there's a lot of people who are off camera who contributed to this project as well, I guess.
Yes, yeah. And they names at the end of the credits. All the relatives that are they were wonderful. They all so it was a great thing, and they all saw it. Most of the musicians, they all saw this as a great opportunity. It was few months that nobody had performed, and all of a sudden, this was a window of doing something. So it was very rewarding, I guess, for them as well. They were mentioning it. And it just was an amazing energy throughout this whole process from everyone.
No,
there's also a common thing, I think, that I can't speak entirely for every single artist, but I could safely feel that I might be able to. And that's that, it's the Colburn school. That's the thing, is that I would go 1,000 miles for the Colburn school, because they always went the extra mile for me, and Hamid is right. It was at a time when people weren't performing, but I mean, it wasn't a sort of, I really felt that, and I could probably say that my fellow artists would feel the same. I think when it was the Colburn who asked, you go, okay, do you know what? somehow we are going to do this because this is my school. And there's a great sense of family and a great sense of belonging that comes from going to the Colburn School, especially because it is like the only big conservatory on the West Coast. And so there is that sense of huge belonging and huge camaraderie that comes from having gone to a place that everybody can say, I have a shared experience, even if it was a different campus or, you know, a different time. The essence and the ethos of the Colburn School, no matter how big it gets, it will remain the same. The kind of the heart of the Colburn is exactly the same. I felt that from when I was at the Colburn School before the big building to when I walked the boards with Joe Thayer and Toby Mayman to what it's grown into now, which is, you know, a world-class institution. And I think that's why people would just say, do you know what, I'm going to pull out as many stops as I humanly can to give back to my school, to give back to the place that trained me, the place that made me who I am as an artist. I mean, it's the least we can do. It's a wonderful gift to give back.
That is wonderful. And I guess that cohesiveness is the behind the scenes secret sauce of this film. Now, Olivia, I wanted to get to you for sure as well. In the film, Jennifer Ringer of the Dance Institute outlines how all the dancers at the school remained effectively alone in your house for the duration of quarantining, practicing in bedrooms and kitchens and backyards. Those type of confines have to make the practical movements of dance particularly hard. Now, your performance in this film was created and choreographed specifically, you know, for this project. What was it like to learn a new dance in isolation and then have to perform it in these circumstances?
Well, it was definitely very different than what I'm used to. Usually when we're in the studios, you know, there's a set plan, there's dates and times, and everything's very concrete. Dancers are used to knowing exactly what to do all the time. And, you know, I, for a while, was dancing in my backyard just because it's better than being inside all the time. And being on a Zoom with Jennifer and James trying to learn choreography that would be in a completely different space than my backyard was something I had to adapt to. And now I've been doing it for over a year, which is insane. But it's definitely a skill that all of us, all the dancers, if they were in the film or not, had to learn over this year. And even when we got to Colburn and we were lucky enough to film there on campus, it was like changing the choreography or changing the spacing. And, you know, we were over Zoom on FaceTime with Hamid, and none of us had ever met him face to face. It was just, hi, I'm Hamid, like, you have to go over here because I can't see you. It was very touch and go. But it was definitely an experience that was very beneficial for me because that was my last time on campus. So that was a great last experience for me on campus, doing something new, doing something to, you know, serve the Colburn community, represent the Dance Academy. It was a great experience, and it definitely had its challenges, but it was very much worth it.
So it sounds as though there was a degree of improvisation that was required. I mean, this was choreographed, of course. It wasn't made up on the fly, but then just given the physical realities of things, you had to adapt.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely props to James and Jennifer on that, because having to think so quickly about what makes sense for the dancer to do, but also what makes sense from a cinematography point of view is a relationship that is very on the fly, but it was definitely a great experience.
Like they had to, if I may jump in, they had to, like when we were filming the dance sequence, James and I worked with Jennifer, we worked long hours before we decided the storyline of the dance piece. But during the performance, they had practiced it, of course, but once you bring it to the sets of the Colburn School, they had to, we had 3 cameras setting up, and each dancer had to hit certain mark in order to dissolve into the next dancer that comes in. So they had to adopt, like if they were doing the big jump, they had to do it now in a way to land in certain place. And those things were decided on the day of the shooting. So I would say, no, it has to end up there, and James would adjust it, and they would. So they did put a lot into it. It was a very complicated day, actually. It was a long day of 2 days we took to film it. And it was very complicated to do it. And they, again, their willingness, and they put into it, and we did multiple takes and from different angles, and it was quite an experience.
It looks very intentional to me. It doesn't look ad hoc one single bit. I think I can.
They had to be on the certain points to point to the cellist, to point to Jean-Yves on the thing. They were, and they didn't know those things were happening in the background. It was just me just thinking like, I'm gonna have them on that window and that wall and that place and that building. So they have to play toward that, not to obstruct them. So it was a lot of work back and forth that we worked out ahead of time with James, and then when we came out to the filming, we had to adjust again, and so they had to adjust as well.
That's great. Well, we're getting to the end of my questions. Eric, I had a few for you. You and your team crafted and perfected the technological aspects of the virtual choir over the past decade. So this isn't something that you just did in response to coronavirus in our times. But as you point out, in the way forward, it has gotten progressively larger and larger and larger. And the one featured here broke all records of participation, nearly 18,000 singers in 129 countries. I mean, I have so many questions. I was hoping you could walk us through how Sing Gently took shape over the course of the pandemic. Take us through your idea to mount a sixth virtual choir, through composing the piece of music, and maybe the stuff that Sel was talking about where you were on a plane. I'd just love to know the process from start to finish, how you arrived at this virtual choir.
Yes, absolutely. Well, actually, to clarify what Sel was saying, actually, Andrew and I weren't on a plane together. We were on the phone. We had taken separate flights together, but the last year feels like I've been on a plane. I don't know about you, so it's possible we were all on a plane. But basically, what happened was, as you say, I've been doing these virtual choirs for 11 years now, and each one that we finish is such a monumental undertaking that when we finish, we always agree that we will never do another one. Amongst all of us, we say, that's it. That took 4 years off our lives. We're not doing that again. And then always something comes up that, okay, this inspires us or spurs us forward. When we finished Virtual Choir 5, the one before this one, it was a tribute to the Hubble telescope. It premiered at the Kennedy Space Center. It had 8,000 singers, and we just couldn't imagine doing anything bigger or grander than this. And really, we had, at least amongst our little team, retired the form. And then, of course, the pandemic happened and the lockdown. And for us, it was that moment that we started hearing these news reports about singers being branded as super spreaders. You remember there were a few news articles about choirs that had gotten together and it had been fatal for some of the people who had joined. And yes, somehow thinking that our community, that our incredibly benign and benevolent art form could be dangerous. That's what really spurred me forward. And almost immediately I contacted Andrew Milstein and said, I'm thinking of doing this. And Andrew was just instantly supportive and creative and said, okay, let's see how we can make this all happen, because it's just a monumental, as I said, undertaking. This one, 25 people involved and across 2 different continents, and it had to happen relatively quickly. And so the first thing I did was write the song, and I knew that I wanted to write something incredibly simple, because it would be being performed by lots of people who had never sung in a choir before or couldn't read music. And initially I was going to set a poem that maybe already existed, and I just couldn't find one that was exactly perfect. And so I thought, all right, I'll write the words myself. And I had this very simple concept: sing gently, just a very clear metaphor for what I hoped would happen as we started to move through the pandemic, which was that we would live compassionately and empathetically with each other. And I wrote it quickly. I'll tell you a small side note is that I know from past virtual choirs that the hardest thing to do by far when you're lining all the voices up is to deal with consonants as people are singing. So if you have a word that begins with, say, take, you can imagine if you have thousands of people all trying to line up the t, it's a bit of a nightmare to line that up. Oohs and ahs are much better. Anyway, I remember writing down the words sing gently and thinking to myself, sing gently, this is going to be a disaster. I knew already, but it was just so important that was the message. And so I wrote that very quickly, and then just became the process of building the whole thing. And maybe more interesting to me at the end than the musical experience was the community experience that happened. As you mentioned, we had nearly 18,000 singers, but we had a very vibrant Facebook group of about 25,000 people, singers from all over the world, unbelievably supportive and positive. And you could sense the community. It was really something. And I held a number of online rehearsals where I just sat at my piano and broadcast live on YouTube. And then while I was doing that, there was, no feedback whatsoever. And I'm playing, and then suddenly there's, oh, my wife just came in. Say hi, baby. This is Laurence. We're in my little studio. She came out to get the furniture. But during those rehearsals where I'm just looking into YouTube and watching the comments, the singers were saying, I'm weeping here for this chance to sing again with everybody. And I was also tearing up and just thinking how strange it is, as Danielle was saying, that we need to find each other. We need to connect. And even this odd way that we found of doing it, it felt like a community. It was really beautiful.
That's amazing. Well, this is most of my time and most of my questions. But before I let all of you go, I guess I just would like to open the floor to each of you to discuss what you hope audiences might take away from watching this film. I think that there's so many important takeaways. What do you hope that people will get out of watching The Way Forward?
Well, certainly, I think what we've seen is that the Colburn School has been focused on access from its earliest days. That students, young people with interest in studying music from whatever part of LA or California or the nation or the world can have the opportunity. And I think one of the wonderful things about all the content that's been produced during COVID, not only at Colburn, but institutions around the globe, is that they are so accessible. So I would say that the idea, and Eric's choir, and the same thing, that no matter where you are, you can participate in that choir. You can watch this beautiful film. You can see extraordinary artists like Danielle and Jean-Yves Thibaudet and Chris Bowers and everyone who participated, and have access to that. And that's why we wanted to make the film available to everyone beginning today. And it'll be there as long as there's a YouTube channel. So I think that for me is just spreading that beautiful sense of healing that music and dance and the performing arts can bring.
As a result of this film, the school has partnered with Tippett Rise in Montana to produce another film with Hamid, Land and Sky. We all saw the trailer at the end of The Way Forward. This will be released on May 20th, so we will keep an eye out for it. Thank you to all the artists who joined us today, and thank you to everyone who tuned in.
Pleasure. Thank you all. Lots of love
Thank
to
you.
everyone. Big
Thanks
hug.
for seeing you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Be
Bye.
well.